Hello everyone, I'm Brian Ganz, musician in residence and member of the piano faculty at St. Mary's College of Maryland. And I welcome you to my first virtual piano talk for the college. In my piano talks, I take you behind the scenes with great works of music, and then I play them for you. Today's piano talk features one of Frédéric Chopin's most beautiful and inspired etudes, the Etude in E major, Opus 10, number 3. This etude displays Chopin's extraordinary gift for melody with one of his most memorable tunes. Several vocal artists from the early to mid 20th century certainly thought so, as the popular songs No Other Love and Tristesse can attest, both of them based on this etude. Chopin himself thought that it was one of his most beautiful melodies and was once very moved by it when he heard one of his own students play it in a lesson. In fact, when his student began to play, Chopin cried out, "Oh, my fatherland." He had left his homeland of Poland when he was only 20 years old, never to return. And it was right around that time that he composed this etude. So he probably felt a close link between the poignant beauty of the work and his deep nostalgia for his homeland. In this piano talk, we'll examine some of the challenges the etude presents for the pianist and how pianists can develop the skills the etude requires. We'll also look at how Chopin makes the piece come alive with asymmetry and syncopation. Now, the French word etude means study, and Chopin was a pioneer of etude creation for pianists. He was not the first to write studies, but his were indeed the first to be both superb vehicles for the development of refined piano playing, or what we call pianism, and absolutely beautiful works of art, fully worthy of the concert stage. Chopin composed 2 sets of 12 etudes, Opus 10 and then Opus 25, as well as 3 so-called nouvelles or new etudes for a total of 27. The Etude Opus 10 number 3 is the first of his relatively slower etudes and invites the pianist to develop his or her powers of expression and especially the production of a singing tone, as well as some other skills we'll get to in a couple moments. So let's listen to the opening melody, and I'll try to play it in a singing way. Now, I'll bet you noticed that there's a moving line just underneath the beautiful melody. In fact, it's so close to the melody that the right hand, which plays the melody itself, also plays that moving line. Let me play that moving line by itself once. As you can see, it's quite lovely, but it's not as interesting as the main melody. So we could say that the lower moving line is primarily accompanymental rather than melodic. As a little side note, however, you wouldn't be alone if you thought that that little accompaniment sounded a bit like the secondary tune in Over the Rainbow. So I'll play the secondary tune as if it were part of the etude. You'll recognize it, I'm sure. So there's Chopin's immense imagination and creativity showing up in popular song again. I don't know for sure, of course, that Chopin inspired that part of the song, but it's possible. But I digress. The point is that the right hand has two roles to play. It sings the main melody and it accompanies that melody. That means that the pianist's right hand has to play notes simultaneously with different amounts of sound and different tonal colors, to speak metaphorically a bit, so as to allow the beautiful melodic line to sing. This is one of the main challenges of the etude, and indeed one of the main challenges of a mature pianism. And it's a skill called voicing. It's a skill no other instrument requires to the degree the piano does. So how can pianists practice this skill? I have a technique for practicing voicing that I call ghost playing. This was inspired by my teacher and mentor, Leon Fleischer, but I don't think I ever heard him call it ghost playing. I have my colleague at St. Mary's College of Maryland, composer David Froome, to thank for that term. He observed me teach this practice technique about 30 years ago and casually called it ghost playing. I thought that was brilliant, and I've borrowed the term ever since. So let me demonstrate ghost playing. First, I'll play a 5-finger pattern. That's simple enough. Now watch carefully. I'll depress the keys only about halfway and try to make no sound whatsoever. That's ghost playing. Now that's hard enough to do all by itself, but things get much harder when you both play normally and ghost play at the same time, because the hands and the arms naturally play with the same amount of weight and speed of attack until we train them not to. So the first way I'll demonstrate this is by playing the melody by itself with the right hand without the Over the Rainbow accompaniment underneath, and I'll ghost play the left hand. Watch carefully, and if I do it correctly, you'll only hear the melody and no bass notes at all. Now that's quite a bit harder than just ghost playing all by itself. Now, as Mr. Fleischer used to teach this technique, we next allow some, but not all, of the left-hand notes to sound. In effect, we're relaxing the tremendous effort to ghost play and allowing just enough weight and speed of attack for the occasional note to sound very delicately. Now remember, you will hear only a few of the left hand notes, while you hear all of the melodic notes in the right hand. And now I'll allow just a few more notes to sound, but always keeping them soft and delicate, while always allowing the right hand notes to sound because they're the singing melody. And finally, I'll allow all the left hand notes to sound, but still making sure they are subdued so that the right hand melody continues to sing clearly above them. You might be wondering what this would sound like, poorly voiced. That is, if I had not practiced ghost playing and developed the skill of voicing. What if both hands and all voices were played absolutely equally? The melody would not be prominent enough. It wouldn't sing clearly. Here with just the left hand and the melodic voice, played about equally, but I'll exaggerate the left hand a little bit. And now with that noodling inner voice, but again with relatively poor voicing. I would liken that sound to looking at a beautiful scene, but through a dirty window. It's sort of an opaque sound rather than a transparent sound. Now, once again, here's the right hand melody without the noodling accompaniment just below, but with the left hand subdued. That is, with good voicing. Okay, we're well on our way to demonstrating the effectiveness of ghost playing for developing the skill of voicing. But you'll notice that I've been leaving out that over the rainbow noodling accompaniment that the right hand plays along with the melody. Now here is where ghost playing becomes fiendishly difficult and most effective as a practice technique. It is possible, although very difficult, to play a melody and ghost play an accompaniment with the same hand. So once again, watch closely. I'll play the melody with this part of my right hand, that is the pinky side, and I'll ghost play the noodling accompaniment with this part of my right hand, that is the thumb side, simultaneously. Here we go. Now that's pretty unnatural for the hand, and I will confess that it took me 13 takes to get it to where all of the noodling accompaniment was ghost played without any sound, and the melodic line was played sufficiently beautifully. But it does get easier with enough practice and eventually becomes second nature for skilled pianists. So the practice technique with one hand proceeds as I demonstrated before, with the hand at first allowing just a few notes from the noodling accompaniment to be heard, and then a few more, and then most, and finally all. But always maintaining that very delicate and soft accompanimental sound while clearly singing the melody. So the final result is, one hopes, one of exquisite balance between the melody and all the accompanying voices. In this etude, we would want to hear the melody above all, of course, but then the bass line would be next in importance, with some of the additional left-hand notes next in line, and finally the softest voice would be the noodling just underneath the melody. So here it is again, with, I hope, good voicing. Now, one small caveat before we move on. I referred earlier to the fact that skillful voicing is like second nature to an experienced pianist. But it takes a while, and at first, ghost playing can cause some tension in the hand. So if you try that, go easy on it, just a minute or two at a time, and follow with some loosening, so as to keep your muscles healthy. But have fun. If you look carefully at the musical score, that's what we call the printed music, the score, you'll notice that Chopin adds some accent marks in places where we would not expect them. And that provides the syncopation I referred to earlier. Let me exaggerate, and you'll see what I mean. Surely Chopin could not have wanted his gorgeous melody marred by such obtrusive accents. So what did he mean to convey by the accent marks? I believe all great composers want their music to come alive in performance, to, in a sense, leap off the page, where, after all, it looks a little like the notes march along in neat little packages of measures divided by bar lines. It all looks very earthbound on the page, and the composers want their music to soar. One way to make the music leap off the page is to move away from overly strong downbeats. For example, if I stress 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that keeps the music stuck on the grid of measures and bar lines. And this is another lesson from my teacher, Leon Fleischer. He had us practice saying and feeling 2, 3, 4, 1, and 3, 4, 1, 2, and 4, 1, 2, 3. And if you drill down into a single beat of music, you'll find the same phenomenon exists. In, for example, 1 quarter note of time, we can play 4 16th notes that we can feel 1, 2, 3, 4, or we can feel them connecting to the next group. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, or 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So here's an example from the very first piece in which Mr. Fleischer taught me this concept. Way back in 1977, it was Beethoven's 4th piano concerto. I think the second work I studied with him. So first I'll exaggerate this sense of 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Now let's hear it once without that exaggeration. Now back to the Chopin. By placing accents on the 2nd 16th note of each group, Chopin makes even the softer left-hand notes come alive and leap off the page. If we overdo it the way I did before, it's pretty unpleasant, and the listener might even get seasick. But if we imply it gently, it becomes another tool in our toolbox for making the music soar above the measures and the bar lines. Here it is a little more gently. Finally, one last thought before I play this masterpiece for you. Did anyone happen to count the measures in the back of your mind as you listened multiple times to the lovely opening melody? Just as there are usually 4 16th notes in a quarter note beat of music, and there are often 4 quarter note beats in a bar of music, there are most often groups of 2, 4, 8, sometimes 16 bars of music in a phrase. The prevalence of this kind of Greek column organization of bar lines in phrasing, as my friend, the marvelous pianist and teacher Marian Hahn calls it, varies from composer to composer. But music is indeed most often pretty symmetric in its phrasing. Once again, my teacher, and as it happens, Marian Hahn's teacher as well, Leon Fleischer, always made a point of alerting his students to the presence of asymmetry in phrasing. Asymmetry is exquisitely beautiful in itself and is also very powerful in its capacity to make the music soar off the page. So by now you've probably guessed that that opening melody of Chopin's, so hauntingly beautiful, is not composed of 2 or 4 measures, and you're right. It's a 5-bar phrase. And don't worry if you did not notice that. It's the kind of thing meant to affect the listener unconsciously. You might think simply, what a beautiful melody, so alive and so mysterious in its ability to touch me. And you might never guess that there's asymmetry in its structure. And here's another confession. I played this piece for many years before I even noticed that myself. So let me demonstrate. I'll count it aloud. I'll skip the second beat of each measure. You'll just hear me count a number for the first beat of each measure. And the first thing you'll hear me count is an and, a pickup. And then we begin counting the measures. So here we go. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5-bar phrase. Now the next phrase, let's see how many bars. 1, 2, 3, 1. So with our first 8 bars, we have a 5-bar phrase and a 3-bar phrase. Talk about beautiful asymmetry. Of course, there's so much more to explore in the etude, and we'll come back to it in future piano talks. But now it's time to set all this exploration and inquiry aside and simply let this beautiful masterwork speak for itself. No, sing for itself.